For years, many Europeans believed they already knew what America was really like. Movies, television, social media, even the news had shaped a picture that seemed impossible to ignore. To some, America was loud, expensive, and completely overrated. Then, the World Cup changed everything. As thousands of European fans crossed the Atlantic to support their national teams, they expected unforgettable football. What they didn't expect was to question everything they thought they knew about the United States. Because between the matches, inside airports, restaurants, neighborhoods, and cities across America, they discovered something no headline had prepared them for. By the end of their trip, many admitted one surprising thing. This wasn't the America we expected. Today we're counting down 7 everyday surprises that completely changed how many European visitors saw America. Let's begin.
Let's start with number 7. They came for the World Cup, but America became the bigger surprise. Most European fans boarded their flights with one goal in mind: football. Months of planning, expensive tickets, and dreams of watching their national team compete on one of the biggest stages in the world had finally become reality. For many, America was simply the host. The stadiums were the destination. The country itself was almost an afterthought. But that changed surprisingly quickly. After landing in the United States, fans found themselves experiencing far more than 90 minutes of football every few days. They explored cities between matches, sampled local restaurants, met people from different states, and discovered places they had only ever seen in films or on television. Slowly, conversations shifted. Instead of talking only about the matches, many visitors began talking about the country around them. Wide highways connected host cities across vast distances. Fan festivals brought together supporters from every corner of the globe. Local residents often welcomed visitors with recommendations, directions, or simple conversations that made them feel at home. What many expected to be just a football tournament became something much bigger. The World Cup introduced them to America, but everyday life in America became the experience they remembered long after the final whistle. And for many European visitors, that was only the first surprise.
6. The convenience that never seemed to stop. After spending a few days in America, many European visitors began noticing something they hadn't expected. Life often felt incredibly convenient. Not because of one big innovation, but because of dozens of small things working together. Something as simple as grabbing a coffee on the way to the stadium became an experience of its own. Drive-thrus weren't limited to fast food. Visitors found drive-thru pharmacies, banks, coffee shops, and in some places even grocery pickup services. For many Europeans, it was a completely different way of handling everyday errands. Instead of making several stops throughout the day, Americans often completed multiple tasks in just a short drive. Then there were the opening hours. After evening matches, many fans expected stores to be closed. Instead, they discovered supermarkets, restaurants, convenience stores, and retail chains still welcoming customers well into the night. Some locations were even open around the clock. For travelers still adjusting to the time difference, that flexibility became surprisingly useful. Forgot your phone charger? Need medicine after midnight? Want dinner after a late match? Finding what you needed often wasn't difficult. Many visitors also noticed how much everyday shopping had been designed around saving time. Large parking lots made arriving easy. Self-checkout lanes let customers move quickly. Online ordering and curbside pickup were available almost everywhere. To Americans, these conveniences often feel completely normal. But for someone experiencing them for the first time, they can leave
a lasting impression.
Several European fans later shared that they hadn't expected convenience to be one of the biggest things they'd remember about America. It wasn't one dramatic moment. It was the feeling that everyday life had been designed to make ordinary tasks a little easier. And as comfortable as that was, the next surprise wasn't about convenience at all. It was about something much more personal.
because many European visitors quickly discovered that Americans had a habit they weren't expecting, one that started with a simple smile and often ended
In a conversation.
5. The friendly conversations they never saw coming. For many European visitors, one of the biggest surprises wasn't a famous landmark or a new experience. It was the people. Before arriving in America, some expected interactions to be brief and transactional. Get your coffee, pay for your groceries, ask for directions, move on. But for many fans traveling during the World Cup, those simple moments often turned into something more. It might begin while waiting in line for breakfast. A stranger notices a football jersey and asks which team they're supporting. Within minutes, they're talking about the tournament, sharing predictions or swapping travel stories. The same thing happens in elevators, on public transport, at gas stations, even while standing in line for a hot dog outside the stadium. Many visitors were surprised by how willing Americans were to start conversations with people they'd never met before. A simple, "How's your day going?" wasn't always just a polite greeting. Sometimes it led to recommendations for local restaurants. Other times it turned into conversations about sports, travel, or life in different countries. Of course, America is a huge country, and experiences can vary depending on the city, region, and the people you meet. Not every visitor has the same experience. But many European fans said they appreciated how approachable people often seemed during their trip. Some even described it as making them feel less like tourists and more like welcomed guests. During the World Cup, that atmosphere became even more noticeable. Cities filled with supporters from around the globe. People wore jerseys from dozens of different nations. Locals stopped to ask where visitors had travelled from, wished them luck for the next match, or simply welcomed them to the United States. For many fans, those small conversations became some of the memories they treasured most. Not because they were planned, but because they happened naturally. Sometimes the most memorable part of a journey isn't the place, it's the people you meet along the way. And while those conversations left a lasting impression, the next surprise was something they noticed every time they stepped behind the wheel or looked out the window during a road trip. Because nothing had prepared many European visitors for just how vast America really is.
4. They never expected America to feel this big. Before arriving, many European visitors knew America was a large country, but knowing it and experiencing it turned out to be two very different things. It wasn't until they started traveling between World Cup host cities that the true scale of the United States began to sink in. For some fans, a trip between matches meant a short domestic flight. For others, it meant hours on the highway, passing landscapes that seemed to stretch on forever. The distances alone surprised many visitors. In Europe, crossing into another country can sometimes take only a few hours by car or train. In America, you can drive for an entire day and still be in the same state. That realization changed how many visitors thought about the country. The roads themselves also left an impression. Wide interstate highways stretched across mountains, deserts, forests, and open plains, connecting cities hundreds of miles apart. For football fans taking road trips between matches, the journey became part of the adventure. Along the way, they discovered small towns, roadside diners, scenic overlooks, and landscapes unlike anything they had imagined before arriving. Then there was the incredible variety. One city buzzed with towering skyscrapers and packed streets. The next offered quiet suburbs, lakes, or rolling farmland. A few days later, another destination looked completely different again. Many visitors said it almost felt like traveling through several different countries without ever leaving the United States. That diversity made every stop feel unique. Each host city
had its own personality, local traditions, food, and atmosphere. For some European supporters, the World Cup became much more than a sporting event. It became an unforgettable road trip across one of the most geographically diverse countries in the world. By the end of their journey, many realized something they hadn't expected. America wasn't one place. It was countless different experiences connected by one nation. And just when they thought they'd seen everything, they walked into a place that completely changed their idea of everyday shopping.
3. They couldn't believe the size of American stores. By this point in their trip, many European visitors thought they had already seen America's biggest surprises. Then they walked into an ordinary supermarket, or at least what Americans consider ordinary. For many visitors, it felt less like a grocery store and more like a shopping destination. The first thing they noticed was the size. Long aisles stretched in every direction, filled with products they had never seen before. Fresh bakeries, huge produce sections, prepared meals, pharmacies, coffee shops, electronics. In some stores, it seemed like almost everything a person could need was available under one roof. But it wasn't just the size that caught their attention. It was the incredible variety. Looking for breakfast cereal? Instead of a handful of choices, there were entire shelves dedicated to dozens of different brands and flavors. The same was true for snacks, soft drinks, coffee, frozen foods, and countless other everyday items. Many European fans admitted they spent far longer shopping than they had planned, not because they needed more groceries, but because they simply wanted to explore. Even stores like Walmart, Target, Costco, and large regional supermarkets became unexpected stops during their travels. Some visitors described it as a real glimpse into everyday American life. Families shopping together, people picking up dinner after work, students grabbing late-night snacks. It wasn't a tourist attraction. It was just another normal day. And somehow that made it even more interesting. For many European visitors, these stores represented something they hadn't expected. Choice, convenience, and a sense that almost anything they needed could be found in one place. By the end of the trip, some even joked that they had taken more photos inside American supermarkets than they had at famous landmarks. But while the stores were impressive, the next surprise was even bigger. Because once they stepped outside and looked around American neighborhoods, many realized everyday life had far more space than they had imagined. 2. They didn't expect so much space. By the middle of their journey, many European visitors had started noticing a pattern. Everything in America seemed bigger. The roads were wider. The parking lots stretched for what felt like forever. The stores were enormous. But nothing highlighted that feeling more than the neighborhoods they explored between World Cup matches. For many visitors, American homes looked very different from what they were used to seeing back home. Tree-lined streets stretched through quiet neighborhoods. Front yards and backyards gave families room to relax, barbecue, or play with their children. Driveways sat beside many homes, and garages were often large enough for multiple vehicles. For some European fans, it felt like the kind of suburban lifestyle they had only seen in movies and television. As they traveled between host cities, they also noticed how different one neighborhood could be from the next. Some areas featured historic homes with unique architecture. Others had modern communities with parks, walking trails, and open green spaces. Every stop offered something new. Many visitors were surprised by just how much room there seemed to be. Even outside the major cities, neighborhoods often felt open and spacious. Instead of buildings packed closely together, many communities had broad streets, mature trees, and plenty of distance between homes. Of course, not every part of America looks the same. The country is incredibly diverse, with dense urban neighborhoods, smaller towns, and rural communities that each have their own character. But for many European visitors, seeing that variety firsthand challenged the picture they had imagined before arriving. Some even said it changed the way they thought about everyday American life. It wasn't just about bigger houses. It was about the feeling of space. Freedom to spread out. The quiet neighborhoods. The parks, backyards, and tree-lined streets that became part of their daily journey between matches. By now, many fans realized they had underestimated America in more ways than one. They had come expecting a football tournament. Instead, they had discovered a country that kept surprising them at every turn. And that brings us to the number 1 surprise. It wasn't the stadiums. It wasn't the highways. It wasn't even the convenience. It was something far more unexpected. Because after everything they experienced, many European visitors reached the same conclusion. America wasn't anything like the country they thought they already knew. They realized America wasn't the country they thought it was. By the end of the World Cup, many European fans had seen more than unforgettable matches. They had experienced America. Not the version they had seen in headlines, not the version they had watched in movies. The real, everyday America. When they first boarded their flights, many thought they already knew exactly what to expect. Some imagined a country that was loud, rushed, and focused only on excess. Others expected everyday life to feel unfamiliar or even disappointing. Instead, many found something much more complicated and much more interesting. They discovered welcoming communities filled with people who were eager to share recommendations, strike up conversations, or simply say hello. They experienced cities that each had their own personality, from historic downtowns to modern skylines, from quiet suburbs to bustling entertainment districts. They drove across landscapes that seemed endless, realizing just how incredibly diverse one country could be. They wandered through enormous supermarkets, enjoyed the convenience of everyday services, and found themselves appreciating little more moments they had never expected to remember. Individually, none of those experiences completely changed their opinion, but together, they painted a picture of America that was far more balanced and far more human than many had imagined before arriving. For many visitors, the biggest surprise wasn't one place or one moment. It was discovering that no single story could truly describe a country this large. Every city felt different. Every neighborhood had its own character. Every conversation added another piece to the journey. The World Cup had brought millions of people together through football, but for many European supporters, it also became an opportunity to see America through their own eyes instead of relying on assumptions. Some returned home talking about the matches. Others couldn't stop talking about the people they met, the places they explored, and the everyday experiences that made the trip unforgettable. And perhaps that was the greatest surprise of all. Not that America was perfect, not that Europe was wrong, but that experiencing a country firsthand can reveal a side you'll never fully understand from a screen. Sometimes the biggest lesson isn't about football, it's about keeping an open mind. Because once the final whistle blew, the memories that stayed with many fans weren't just the goals they celebrated. They were the ordinary moments they never expected to remember.
So what do you think? If you've ever travelled to the United States, or if you're planning to visit for the World Cup, which of these surprises do you think would stand out the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story from Worldviews America. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.